Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. My name is Daphne Worrell, Marketing Manager for ODG by MCG, and I'm excited to welcome you to today's webinar introducing the new ODG by MCG. During this webinar, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat feature located in the lower corner of your screen. We'll save some time at the end for questions, and any questions that we don't get to, we will get back to you through email following the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent to you within 1 week. Our presenter today is Carrie Costilla, Senior Account Executive for ODG by MCG. Carrie trains providers, case managers, and claims adjusters in the use of ODG within the work comp, short-term disability, and auto insurance markets. Carrie has worked for 6 years in the delivery of evidence-based guidelines and claims analytics. Carrie, you can take it from here.
Thanks, Daphne, and welcome everyone. Just going to share my screen. Today I'm going to show you the latest ODG platform, ODG by MCG. So for those of you who are familiar with the legacy version of ODG, this is going to look very different. The site has been in the works since we were acquired by MCG Health. MCG Health is the worldwide leader in evidence-based care guidelines and claims analytics for the group healthcare market. So ODG was a great fit to be their workers' compensation and disability division. As part of MCG, we're also now owned by Hearst Corporation. Many of you may have heard of Hearst. Hearst is a media conglomerate that has branches in all kinds of consumer media, like newspapers, magazines, television, online media. But they also have a branch called Hearst Health, which is, of course, where we fall along with MCG. One important philosophy that Hearst goes by and that inspired the creation and launch of ODG by MCG is that business media should resemble consumer media. So just because it's technical doesn't mean it should look and feel technical. I think you'll get a strong sense of that as we go through the site today. That's really what drove the creation of the site, and I think you can kind of feel it as you go through and use it and see it. We'll start just by looking at the home screen. This will be the first thing you see when you go to odgbymcg.com, and it gives you a kind of nice overview of how the site is structured. Probably one of the first things you'll notice is this tab-based format, which is a departure from what the legacy site looked like. And the point of this tab-based format is to bring the content forward so that the end user can work on one claim at a time, jumping from, duration guidelines to treatment guidelines to cost projections without losing their place. So you don't have to feel lost or overwhelmed going to web page after web page, having to go back on your browser 1,000 times to get to your original spot. You'll be on one web page jumping to different pieces of a claim while still working on one overall page, one overall claim. So the point of that was to increase usability and decrease a user feeling lost or overwhelmed. We want to highlight the 3 main categories of ODG content. Pretty much any content you find in ODG, it's going to fall under one of these. And those are disability duration and return to work, evidence-based medical treatment, and cost. So cost is going to encompass all cost modeling for the purposes of setting reserves or for benchmarking costs, measuring performance, and demonstrating savings. Now, an important note with these content categories is that they're all interrelated. So really the biggest driver of cost, particularly in a workers' comp claim, is disability or claim duration. So the longer that claim is open, the higher the cost. Now, one way to reduce duration is, of course, by using duration guidelines. That's a huge part of what ODG has. But even more importantly, through the provision of evidence-based medical treatment. So if you get the wrong care or you just have to wait too long for the right care, that's what ends up driving needless claim duration and then in turn really drives up cost. There's a lot of ways to access ODG content from this homepage. Probably the most obvious is up here at the top, the search field. You can just type in a keyword or phrase here. I typed in lumbar sprain, and I can see my search results here at the bottom, broken down into different areas of ODG. So these are my duration guidelines, TAU, which is a treatment tool, and then costs. And I can click on any of those to get into the content. You'll notice that we've defaulted on this new site to search by ODG medical topics rather than by like CPT or ICD codes, because we got a lot of feedback on the legacy site that if an end user didn't have a code and did a search for, something like lumbar, they might get 60 different hits for just one word. And it would be paralyzing not knowing which code to choose if you didn't know the code to begin with. So we wanted to avoid that and make it as simple as possible to get where you need to go. That being said, if you have a code and that's what you want to search by, you do have that capability. So there's a little codes piece at the top of the page. Just check next to the type of code you want to search by, and then you can type in, for example, ICD-10 and get your hits that way. So that's still a possibility. Some other ways to get into the content. I'm just going to refresh my home page. So you can jump into any tab without entering a keyword or code. You can also go into any of the larger categories. And then down at the bottom, we have these sort of quick reference lists where you can jump into some of the most common return to work diagnoses and most common medical treatments. These lists are configurable. So if your team sees a different 15 diagnoses or treatments every day, that are more common, let us know. Let your account manager know, and we can make these lists whatever you want to see. And kind of keep that in mind as we go through the entire site, because almost everything on this new site is configurable. It's another huge advantage of this new platform is the ability to sort of build and customize the site to fit your specific needs. And then lastly, to jump into content, we have this graphic of the human body, so you could jump into a body system like pulmonary or neck and upper back, etc. I'm just going to jump into back sprain because that is by far the most commonly accessed diagnosis in ODG, so it's a great place to start. You'll notice it takes me to the duration tab by default, but check marks are being lit up in other content areas. So that's just telling me content is being delivered there as well. So I could always jump over to treatment if that's what I'm looking for. But we'll start with duration since we're here anyway. So you can see that the return to work guidelines in ODG by MCG are represented on a dynamic timeline. So this is telling me if today is day 0 and my claimant has a back sprain, the average disability duration is out here at day 19, also represented by the A value. And then at day 10, we have a marker for best practice, also represented by the B value. The best practice duration is the number we want to aim for or manage to. The best way to achieve that best practice goal is to share this content. One thing you'll notice throughout this site is we've really tried to make everything more shareable. To open the lines of communication, to communicate all of these guidelines and all of this content and data with all the stakeholders on a claim, we've made that a lot easier on this site compared to the legacy site. So you'll see that at day 7, there's a marker on this timeline that says return to work prescription. And that's telling me that if I want to achieve this best practice goal of 10 days, then I need to share this content by day 7. There's a couple ways to share it. We've got the print button. So if you like the format of the page as is, you could print it or save it as a PDF to email to someone, or you can export as a return to work prescription. And the return to work prescription form allows us to add claim level information, like your name, contact info, employer name, employee name, let's say John Doe, claim number, physician name, date of injury, surgery if there was one. Then you have this comments field where you can enter a personalized note. Maybe you want to say, "Dear Dr. Andrews, can you go over these goals and restrictions for return to work? Let me know if you think it's appropriate." Or you can just insert recommended ODG text, just kind of a generic version of what I just said. Scroll down and you choose your scenarios and the information you want included in this form to be communicated. You can choose to include the target duration of 10 days as just a general goal. You can include the average of 19 days. Below that, we have scenarios. So this is going to break down our best practice goals based on the severity of the injury and the type of work we're returning to. Often it'll also include scenarios for surgery if it's a diagnosis where surgery is commonly performed. In this case, let's say John Doe has a severe lumbar sprain and typically does heavy manual work. Well, we definitely want to include that scenario to return to heavy manual work in 35 days. That's going to be our goal for return to full duty. But we also want to encourage the release to modified duty. So let's communicate those scenarios as well. Let's include clerical or modified work and manual work. And just to be clear, this is telling me that a severe case of lumbar sprain is ready for a clerical position right away, 0 to 3 days. You have the opportunity to add any notes or additional information you want to add here to those scenarios, or you can insert those scenarios and edit them directly. Maybe you want to be extra conservative for whatever reason. There's a risk of re-injury or something, or a history. You can use your judgment and expertise to change these scenarios as you see fit, but these are a framework for you to jump off of. Below that, we have our activity modifications. You'll notice there's a checkbox to include a job function evaluation form if you want to. You don't have to. If you think these activity modifications are sufficient, great. But if you want to include a job function evaluation form to get a little more into the details of each shift and the physical demands of that shift, you can. And we'll see what that looks like in a second. But for now, we've got to include any activity modifications that apply. So in this case, we want to include regular and modified, and these will always be condition specific. These are, specific to lumbar sprain, but they would be very different if our claimant had carpal tunnel syndrome or rotator cuff tear or whatnot. So these are always going to be very specific to the condition, and they get down into the details, like how many pounds can be lifted, how often, should they be walking, sitting, standing, and for how long. So you can add any notes to these, insert those modifications if you want to make direct edits to them. Again, if you want to be extra conservative and make any changes here, you can do that, or just leave them as is if you're happy with how they look. Down at the bottom, we have a field for job description. If you already have a job description, for example, maybe an employer or a case manager has been given this job description, already has it written out, great. You can copy and paste it in here. Otherwise, we do have a tool that will populate a job description for you, and I'm going to show you that in a couple minutes, but for now we'll leave it blank and it won't be included on our return to work prescription form. We'll create a printable document, and this is what it's going to look like. It's one page with your contact info, all the claim information, the personalized note, the return to work guidelines or the best practice goals we've selected for our different scenarios, then of course our specific activity modifications. Then below we've got that signature field. So for example, a treating doctor could look over this, decide if it's appropriate, make any notes as necessary, and then sign off. I've also seen a lot of clients that use this to communicate with the injured worker directly or with the employer or supervisor of the injured worker, just so that everyone can be on the same page as far as returning to work, what our goals are for getting this injured worker back to work, and what the restrictions are going to look like and for how long. So it's just really made to be a communication tool so everyone can be on the same page with these goals and limitations. Now, we decided to include a job function evaluation form, so there is a second page here. This is what that looks like. You can edit it directly inside your browser. If you want to get into how many hours the claimant should be standing, sitting, kneeling, etc. This is, again, if you don't think those ODG modifications are getting, into enough detail and you want to add a little more information for the treating doctor to sign off on, or if you even want to send a blank form to a doctor, it depends case by case and provider by provider who's going to want to fill this out. But if you think that's something that the treating doctor is going to want to do, you can send that as well. So back to our duration tab. So far, these durations we're looking at are at the diagnosis level. So that is where our refine button comes in, because we want guidelines at the claim level, not just the diagnosis level. So I'm going to hit refine, and obviously there's a bunch of fields here that we can enter information into, and it's going to affect our return to work goals and restrictions and projections. The first one I want to talk about, which I briefly mentioned, is the ODG job profiler. So we've always been able to enter the DOL job class, which is great. It gets a little more specific, but now we can be even more specific and enter an actual job title. So as you type a job title, a list of titles will appear based on 32,000 jobs in the job profiler database. You will select the one that's the best fit. In this case, I'm using firefighter. When you select your job title, once you select your job title, you will get specified return to work projections. There we go. Specified return to work projections and a new risk assessment score based on the actual job description, which is going to be populated for you based on the job title you entered. It also has highlighted the specific best practice goals for me based on the job. And when I go into my return to work prescription, now when I scroll down, that job description field is full for me, and it's got a very specific job description for me based on the job title. And again, you're able to edit this. If there's any pieces that don't apply to this particular case, you can remove them. For example, maybe assigned duty in Marine Division of the Fire Department. If that doesn't apply, just remove it, or add any notes that you deem necessary. For even more detail on the job description, there's a whole tab dedicated to the job profile. So I can click on that tab. And here I can find that job description, which of course defines the job duties of a firefighter in this case. This tab is also going to include the precise physical demands of the job within a typical 8-hour work shift, as well as a job demand score. So this one is 99, which means that this job is more demanding than 99% of all jobs in the database. And you can see that the job demand, the physical job demand, is broken down into body parts as well. So this information is designed to be shared, much like all of the information pretty much in this new site. To share this info, you can click on Share Job Profile Now, enter your information and the claim number, then you'll enter the employer's information and a personal note, and hit Share, which will send the job demand and job description information to the employer, who can then review and approve and make informed decisions on whether or not they can accommodate modified duty. And all of this is included in an ODG subscription at no extra cost. In some instances, an employer may find that the provided job description requires some customization. And for cases like these, there is an upgraded platform of the ODG job profiler called JobX. So the JobX platform includes several added features, including the ability to customize jobs by embedding job-specific videos and entering unique and essential physical and cognitive demands associated with each job. JobX also allows for the development of a digital data bank of jobs that can easily be shared in real time. So this opens the lines of communication among all stakeholders in a claim. So this is going to encourage the safe and timely release to modified duty, eliminate unnecessary lost time, improve worker productivity, and then also ultimately, reduce costs overall. So employers may wish to subscribe directly to this, or payers, TPAs, MCOs can offer sponsored access to their employer clients through the ODG portal. If you want to discuss this further, please let us know. But for now, I'm going to go back to our duration tab and get back into the need of ODG by MCG on its own. So back in our duration tab, we've got more refined fields that we can use to get specified return to work projections. Of course, a really important factor is going to be age. This is going to have a huge effect on recovery time and, of course, then return to work time. So let's say our claimant is 55. That affected our return to work projections. We've also got this list of confounding factors. These are factors that tend to prolong disability duration, though often unnecessarily. So it's important to factor these in if you have them on a claim, because statistically they tend to have a huge effect on return to work and disability duration. So let's add depression, for example. And now that I've added depression, I can see a bigger gap develop between what can be achieved, which is the best practice, and what the actual average is. The risk assessment score, you'll notice, also jumped up into the high risk level claim. Just so you know, the risk assessment score is a great tool for seeing the big picture, kind of can flag us from the start to let us know how high is the risk here relative to other claims. And then you can prioritize early on your high and extreme risk level claims, so that you know which ones are going to need the most case management and the best case management to make sure that they don't become outliers. Because if they're in the high and extreme risk level, it's likely to mean that they are likely to become outliers. So that risk assessment score especially is determined by a bigger gap between that A and B value, that what can be achieved and what the average is. The end goal for case management, claims handling, or other interventions like IMEs is to facilitate the best outcome on the claim, or really manage from point A to point B, and then capture the difference as savings. A couple other things, you can also add claim type to refine your projections, meaning you can choose either workers' comp or non-OC disability. We default to any because it's just going to give you a more rounded out data set, because it's going to be using all of the data we have. But you can always choose one or the other if you prefer. A few other things we added to our duration guidelines. We have more consumer-facing material than we used to have. So for one thing, we've added these videos, just short animated videos on the diagnosis itself in layman's terms.
The bones that make up the spinal column are called vertebrae. They are also named for their locations. The cervical vertebrae are in the neck. The thoracic vertebrae are in the upper back. And the lumbar vertebrae are in the lower.
So you get the general idea. It's just basically non-technical terminology to explain, particularly to an injured worker, that's who this is geared for, what this diagnosis entails. But really, this can be used for anyone who doesn't have a medical background and just needs a better understanding of what this diagnosis means. In that same vein, we interface with several reputable sources like Medline Plus and Physiopedia Again, mainly as a resource for educating the injured worker. This is going to be non-technical, non-medical terminology describing diagnoses, procedures, medicines. You'll notice links to Medline Plus throughout ODG content. This is something, you can copy and paste this link into an email to an injured worker or print this information out and hand it to them. I think many of us, especially people who don't have a medical background, are guilty of Googling our diagnosis and kind of finding a lot of information, much of which is not reliable. So this is a way to ensure that the injured worker is empowered to have correct and reputable information about their actual diagnosis and treatment plan. A couple other things to mention on this duration tab. Another way to get claim level projections. Sure, we've added a bunch of refined stuff. We've got our age, we've got our confounding factors, but often there's multiple diagnoses present on a claim, or maybe surgeries. We can add as many as are present. So for example, maybe John Doe had a discectomy. Type your word or phrase up here at the top. You'll see your hits appear. Select the best fit. In this case, it'll be a lumbar discectomy. Now that I've added discectomy, I've got new specified return to work data for a case that has undergone that surgery on the low back. The model is telling me our best practice goal is 150 days now. But you actually have the option to view different pathways and overrule the model based on the type of surgery, severity of injury, and whether or not the worker can return to modified duty or restricted work. So maybe John Doe can return to modified work, and we can bring that goal down to 28 days for returning to restricted or modified duty. If you scroll down, you can get codes related to the topic on your duration tab. Further down, we've got our activity modifications, which you saw in the return to work prescription. And then lastly, we've got applicable physical therapy and chiropractic guidelines. Of course, these will get more extensive when you're diving into the actual treatment guidelines, but these are just quick references for you when you're inside the duration tab. You can always explore further in the treatment tab. So speaking of the treatment tab, that's what we'll move on to next. I'm going to click on Home, and you'll notice that it kind of refreshes and restarts from there. So you'll click on Home when you want to start from scratch with a new claim. If you ever do that by accident, though, you can just go back on your browser, and it'll remember everything you had plugged in before. So from the Home tab, there's a few ways to get into the treatment guidelines. One is to just click on a medical treatment down here at the bottom. So if I click on discectomy, it's going to take me to the treatment tab. It shows me a list of all of the topics in the treatment guidelines that mention discectomy. And if I'm maybe interested in seeing the criteria of when to do a discectomy, then I'll want to click on the applicable topic, the one that I need, and then it'll take me to those full treatment guidelines. And they'll be systematized in such a way that tells me the body system, in this case low back, the treatment type, of course this is a surgery, but other treatment types might be imaging, medications, physical medicine, etc. I also have my recommendation status. This one is conditionally recommended, which usually just means that it's recommended in some cases and it's going to refer you to criteria. Below that, I have my recommendation statement. In this case, it's a short one because, again, it's referring me to criteria. And below that, I've got my criteria. So these are always going to be highlighted in blue. They're easy to spot. And these are just criteria on whether or not to proceed. So they're indications to optimize success. Below my criteria, I have risk versus benefit information. And this is often included for surgical procedures. It's not going to be present in all treatment topics, but especially stuff like surgery where it's most valuable to weigh that risk. versus benefit. We'll have that highlighted in this peach color, again, so it's easy to spot. And at the bottom, we have our evidence summary. And the good news is you'll probably never have to touch this, but it's nice to know it's there because it means that those recommendations and criteria are not just somebody's opinion. They're not just pulled out of a hat. They are based on actual scientific evidence. And if you ever do need to explore the evidence, all of these studies are links where you get the full reference to the study. You get a PMID number, which you can click on. Takes you to the full abstract of the study on the National Library of Medicine's PubMed database. Again, you'll probably never need to use this, but it's good to know it's there because it means that the recommendations and criteria are credible and they're based in actual evidence. One other way to explore the treatment guidelines, which is pretty cool, and it was not something we were able to do on the legacy site, is if you just click on the treatment tab without entering any keyword or topic, you can filter through all of the guidelines found in ODG. So maybe I am a treating doctor and I want to see all of the generally recommended procedures having to do with physical medicine for a low back disorder. I now have a list of all of the topics that fall under those filters. You'll see on the left you're given the little icon indicating the recommendation status. All of these are blue for conditionally recommended or green for recommended because we asked to only see recommended procedures. And then on the right, you'll see the body system. All of these are low back because that's how we filtered it. You can put your cursor over any topic to see the recommendation statement before you decide which one you want to click on and see the full guidelines for. And then once you do, you can click on it and get those full guidelines. In this case, the full physical therapy guidelines for low back. At that point, you can pin as many procedures as you want. So let's add our discectomy back in. As I search and click, it's going to keep pinning topics for me, just like we did on the duration tab when we threw in discectomy. But in this case, it's listing all my treatment guidelines in one place. So I've got discectomy guidelines. There's my physical therapy guidelines. Maybe I also need to add hot or cold packs. And I can keep going on and pinning these procedures in one place. Once I have all of the treatment guidelines I need gathered together, I can then print or save as a PDF to be emailed. And this is how I can communicate the treatment guidelines for any particular procedures that have either been considered or been ordered for any case or claim. It seems simple, but it's not something we've been able to do, ever before. So it's very cool to be able to pin all those and put them in one place. I know we had a lot of clients who used to copy and paste treatment guidelines into Word documents, and the formatting would get all messed up. So this is much easier and quicker. So another piece having to do with treatment is the Tau index. And again, I'm going to hit home and refresh, start from scratch with a new example. I'm going to click on carpal tunnel syndrome this time. It's taking me to the duration tab, but I can see a check mark has lit up in the Tau index. So I'm going to jump over there. Tau stands for Treatment Analyzer on Outcomes. And the Tau index itself is actually a whole new metric that we have built for this new site. And I'll get into what it means, but first I just kind of want to go over what we're looking at right now. Essentially what we're seeing is a list of all the procedures that might be considered for carpal tunnel syndrome, because that's the diagnosis we came in with. It breaks down each of these procedures by CPT code, procedure name, procedure group or category. We also have the frequency, and the default is that they're sorted by frequency, so you see the most common procedures at the top, but you can sort by any of these columns. if I click on frequency, I can see some more information, like median number of visits, average number of visits, auto-authorized number of visits. And then, of course, I also get my payment flag and my TAU index. So first we'll go over the payment flag, or approval flag, we also like to call it. All the ones we're looking at so far up here at the top are thumbs ups, but they're different colors. So first thing you want to remember is that any procedure with a thumbs up should be auto-approved. There is no reason for hesitation, no reason for review. These are procedures that should absolutely be ordered or approved without hesitation if a doctor so chooses. The difference is a green flag is what we call evidence-based approval. So that means that there are plenty of randomized controlled trials and systematic reviews to back up this procedure, versus a yellow flag, which is what we call data-driven approval. And that is where the TAU index comes in. So the TAU index is a metric we've built in order to fill in the gaps where medical evidence may be lacking. So the TAU index is actually a score, and it ranges from -100 to +100. And it tells us how well each medical intervention correlates with return to work. Anything above 0 is better than average. As a note here, we know that correlation does not equal causation. But because it's associated with good outcomes, we can definitively say that it is not causing poor outcomes. So this, paired with the support of medical evidence and claims data, means that it's a safe procedure to auto-approve or auto-authorize. So we've seen green and yellow flags with thumbs ups. There's 2 other possibilities for flag colors. I'm going to kind of play around with our results here so we can see more. I'm going to show 100 entries per page instead of 10. And as we scroll down, we can find some red flags. As you can see, a red flag is just a picture of like a little dude on a headset. It's just saying route for review. This does not at all mean deny. There's no such thing as a deny flag in the TAU index because this tool is built for auto approvals. This tool was built to get the right care approved quickly, not ever to deny care automatically. So we've got a red flag, which just means route for review, which is similar to a black flag, which is also a review flag. The difference is a black flag is what we call a good candidate for denial. Even though a black flag is technically a review flag, often a black flag procedure is one that is probably not going to be appropriate. So again, we never want this tool to be used for auto denials, which is why we still call black flags review flags, but we did want to give that distinction between red and black so that anyone using this tool will know which procedures are very likely to be appropriate. You just need to double check in the treatment guidelines and find the criteria, make sure the patient is a good candidate, versus a black flag, which is probably not appropriate. Just to give you a good example of a red flag, I'm going to filter work conditioning and work hardening. This is a perfect example of a red flag because it's expensive and it's effective only for carefully selected patients. So it's worth the time and money it takes to do the review. And at this point, when you see that it's a red flag, that's when you want to go into the treatment guidelines, look at the criteria, make sure this particular claimant is going to be a good candidate, versus a black flag, which again is probably inappropriate. So as you can see, you can filter using this little search field. You can filter by text or code. So maybe you have a CPT code you want to search by, you can do that as well. And as usual, as per you've seen on all these tabs, we've got the easy print button and also this easy copy URL button. That's on every tab as well. It's just going to send you directly to the link. It's remembering the diagnosis you've plugged in and any refined data you've plugged in, and it's going to make it so if you send this URL to anyone else that has ODG access, they'll be able to see the same thing you see, or you can paste it in like a Word document to save it for yourself so you can come back later and make any changes to the claim without having to manually re-enter information. Just a couple other tabs to go over. Formulary is the next one. Again, I'm going to hit home and refresh and jump over to formulary. So the formulary is where we get our medication guidance. This is where we index all the medications found in the treatment guidelines. And we have them categorized by drug class, generic name, and brand name. You can sort by any of these categories. You'll notice all drugs are one of two colors, green and red. This column, this status column, answers the question, is this drug approved as a first-line treatment in ODG? So green is yes, and red is no. But keep in mind that a red flag or a red drug or a no drug may be approved as a second-line treatment, just not first-line. And we also include cost information in this last column. This is representative of a typical course of therapy. So it's not per pill or per week, but instead based on that particular drug, what the typical course of therapy is. So that might be 5 days or 30 days. If you ever want to find out specific to that drug, what the typical course of therapy is, you can find that in this formulary info PDF at the top here. Keep in mind you can also just view one particular drug class. Maybe you only want to see cannabinoids. You have that ability. Or you can filter by a drug name, for example, maybe gabapentin. And this is an extension of our treatment guidelines, which means you can click on any record and it'll take you into the treatment guidelines where you can see where that record is addressed, see why it's recommended or not recommended, any criteria, if applicable. And then if you scroll all the way down, you get corresponding NDC codes to that drug, also linked into Medline Plus. So you can get that consumer-facing information on the drug. One last piece having to do with this drug formulary tab is the opioid MED calculator. And that stands for morphine equivalent dose. This is where we can enter any daily dosage to calculate the morphine equivalent. And colored flags are triggered as opioid dosage approaches, reaches, and exceeds ODG parameters. You can scroll down to see the breakdown of the opioid dosing risk levels. Of course, you don't have to do all of your dosage under one. You can spread them out over multiple drugs per day and get that morphine equivalent. You can also enter a drug name if you don't see it in this list, down here at the bottom. Okay, and just one more tab to go, and that is the finale, the costs tab, where we can get cost projections at the claim level. I'm going to start with a whole new example. Let's do knee sprain this time. And then I'll jump over to costs. And before we look at these costs, let's add some claim level information. So we've got knee sprain as our diagnosis. Let's refine and say the claimant is 45. We can watch how these costs change as I enter more information. Let's also say the claimant is in California. Let's add confounding factors, diabetes and obesity. Okay. Now we can enter an actual claims wage if we have it. Otherwise, it's just going to go by the state average weekly wage of whatever state you've entered. Let's say $1,200 for the actual claims wage. And then you can check the box for medical only to see the indemnity costs disappear. Of course, you'll notice that when I do that, even the medical costs are reduced dramatically. That's just because the best thing you can do is keep people working in some capacity. It's not only therapeutic, but it also keeps overall costs down. I am going to add those indemnity costs back in just for while we go over these different cost projections. So you'll see at the top, our cost projection is for the total claims costs. And then we have it broken down into indemnity, medical, and administrative expense. Within each of these cost projections is a dial. So you can choose, based on what you need these cost projections for, you can change this dial. We've got 3 data sets within each dial. The first is best practice. Our best practice is a reasonable expectation for a well-managed, top-tier claim. This data set is going to underestimate costs for most claims, but it's great to use as a goal. And it's pretty much going to be based on physiological recovery times rather than just based in, actual claims data, versus these other 2, which are based in claims data. This middle one on the top, the claim typical, is aptly named. It is representative of a typical claim. It's actually the statistical average minus the outliers, which would otherwise drive that number up considerably. So even though this claim typical number is not the actual statistical average, it is more representative of a typical claim than the true average is. Speaking of which, the claim max is the true statistical average, including the outliers. So this is the one you want to use if your case is particularly problematic, or if you want to demonstrate savings retrospectively against the true historical average. You can also customize it. So move this dial anywhere in between, depending on the particular claim you're working on, and using your own judgment, your own expertise. Just like the other tabs, we've got the easy print function, and once you print, go to that print page and you print or save as a PDF, you can move that dial wherever you want it to be for saving purposes. And that sums up our demo for today. So Daphne, if any questions came in, now would be the time to answer those.
All right, great. Thanks, Carrie. That was excellent. We do have some questions. How much does it cost to gain access to the site?
So ODG by MCG is priced organizationally. So it's going to vary based on your organization type and needs and size. If you're a current legacy subscriber, you should inquire with your account manager or write to the help desk, or anyone can just respond to the webinar email you got, and we can put you in touch with the right person to get you a specified cost. But it just varies depending on your organization.
Okay. What if I can't find a topic in the treatment guidelines?
Okay, so your first step is to talk to an ODG expert, because a lot of times the topic you're looking for is in there somewhere. It just maybe goes by a different topic name, and usually either the ODG help desk or an account manager or implementation specialist can help you find it. If it's not covered, though, we would bring your inquiry to editorial, and they would add it to the research queue, and then we would inform you when an update is made. So it's kind of cool because you can be a part of the update process. One more thing, too, on that note is that you can actually track ODG updates on your own. So if you go to the treatment tab and click on treatment info and suggesting changes, it goes over the formal process for requesting updates. But you can really just write to the help desk and they'll take it from there. And then scroll down and you have this link to download the actual updates file. So every month that file is updated with whatever updates have been made in the past 30 days. So you can see what has changed, and you can actually be a part of the updates process and keeping track of it. We want to make it totally transparent so that everyone can kind of follow along with it.
All right, great. Thanks, Carrie. Let's see here. Can you please quickly show us again how to obtain the return to work guidelines and the treatment guidelines?
Sure. So, I'll do it as an example. So basically, you start with a diagnosis for your duration guidelines. So you could do that through the search field. Let's just maybe type carpal tunnel as our diagnosis. And as you can see, we could do carpal tunnel release surgery or carpal tunnel syndrome, or we could probably do both. But just to sort of show, when I click on that diagnosis, it takes me to the duration tab. That's where I get my duration guidelines. And, this gives you a general overview at the diagnosis level. I always recommend refining to get more specified, customized projections, so at the claim level. So that's where you would enter either your DOL job class or job title, age, confounding factors, and that's when you're going to get the most accurate projections for return to work. Treatment guidelines, I've entered carpal tunnel, so I can actually jump over to treatment guidelines from there and get carpal tunnel related treatment guidelines. And this is just going to give me an overview of some topics having to do with carpal tunnel. And I can click on any that I want to know more about. I can also filter through any of these treatment guidelines. Maybe I am only looking for injections. Then I can narrow down that long list to just the injections having to do with carpal tunnel. So once you see the topic you want to read more about, you can click on it and get your full treatment guidelines for that topic. There's a lot of ways to delve into the content, basically, but feel free to reach out to the help desk or your account manager too, and they can schedule a call with you to just one-on-one do some examples together and answer any questions you have.
All right, thanks, Carrie. How does pain medication tie into a specific surgical procedure?
So let's see. Pain. I'm going to go to the pain. We have a whole body system just on pain in our treatment guidelines. So I'm going to go to the treatment tab. Select pain, and let's do our category as medications. So I would say this is the best way to get answers on medication guidance or by using the formulary. Sometimes when you go to a treatment topic on a surgery itself, it will refer you as a cross-reference to common medications that tie into that surgery. But really the best way to get specified guidelines is going to be through the actual drug topic itself. So for example, we have really extensive opioid guidelines, which is probably what you were referring to when you were asking about after surgery drugs prescribed. I know that was likely what you were thinking of. So then you're able to jump into our opioid guidelines from the treatment tab as well. It's kind of a multi-layered question. I may get back to you in an email separately because I think I could talk for 20 straight minutes on that.
All right, great. Thanks, Carrie. Let's see here. We have another one. How do you determine costs in the formulary?
Sure. We'll go back to the formulary tab. The formulary info PDF is a good place to check. This kind of gets into where we've gotten our information, what the formulary is based on. But also if you scroll all the way down, that's when we get to the cost of therapy calculation. So as I mentioned, that costs column is based on a typical course of therapy, and that varies by drug. So this is where you want to go inside this PDF to see for each drug what is a typical course of therapy. So for acetaminophen, for example, 30 days versus buprenorphine, which is a 5-day supply. So it just varies based on the drug, but this is a good place to check.
All right. Will the old site, the legacy ODG, still be kept up to date?
Definitely. We would not have a site be in existence if it was out of date. So definitely, as long as the legacy site exists, you can rest assured that the content will be up to date. However, product development and new features are reserved exclusively for ODG by MCG at this point. So keep that in mind. I mean, the platform of ODG by MCG is already a big improvement just in usability and functionality, but also we've already got several additional tools and features that are not available on the legacy site. So that's going to continue. It's just going to keep improving. So even though the scientific evidence and the content is going to be updated on legacy, the product development is not, basically. So that's the real encouragement to move on to this new platform.
All right, thank you, Carrie. It looks like we have time for one more question, and if you want to kick it back to my screen, I can also have the contact information there. Because this last question is there further training available for my staff?
Definitely. If you're already an ODG subscriber, your account manager, that's what we're here for, is to train you guys. So if you know your account manager and already have their contact info, you should reach out to them. Otherwise, the help desk is a great resource, and they can point you in the right direction for training, or just reply to the webinar email, and we'll put you where you need to be. We'll point you in the right direction.
All right, and also
by the way,
our marketing website, which is mcg.com/ODG, also has a lot of options for training on there. So there are a lot of different ways to get training, and thank you, Carrie. That was a great presentation. It was very thorough and very exciting. So thank you, everyone who attended, and please be sure to reach out to us if you have more questions. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.